Hi, this is Tina Powell, host of In the Suite, where I sit down with top women leaders and some of the biggest names in the financial services and the wealth management industry. Together, we'll discover some of their best secrets and top strategies to grow a great business, build a strong brand, and lead teams in the 21st century. I hope you'll enjoy hearing their amazing personal stories of triumph, trepidation, and transformation in hopes of becoming better leaders ourselves. The time for you to lead is now, and you're in the suite. One of the first people that came to mind when coronavirus and COVID-19 became household words was my friend Carolyn McClanahan. And this episode was not at all planned. And at first, I even debated about whether or not asking Carolyn to be a guest right now, figuring that she's super busy tending to her clients at Life Planning Partners and her patients at the clinic. Yes, I said patients. You see, Carolyn is both a medical doctor and a certified financial planner with her own firm, Life Planning Partners, a fee-only financial planning firm she started in 2004 in response to her and her husband, Trib, searching for the right type of comprehensive financial planning firm that she and her husband desired. In 2005, Carolyn left medicine for money and began volunteering at a clinic working for the homeless. And in 2010, she really became a life force and a fearless advocate for health reform after digesting the entire Affordable Care Act. Carolyn's a frequent and sought-after speaker at top industry conferences, and to be blunt, Carolyn's work is everywhere. She's a contributor to Forbes, Financial Planning magazine, and she also serves on the CNBC Financial Advisor Council. She is, in addition to that, the go-to person for press publications such as the New York Times, Wall Street Journal, Washington Post, and so many others. And to believe it or not, this powerhouse of a woman stays sane by raising monarch butterflies. She cycles, she runs, and throws a mean javelin. So this is an exclusive bonus episode with a bold leader in the financial planning profession we are so lucky to have and especially grateful for. I really hope that you enjoy this episode. Thanks everyone for tuning in. So Carolyn, thank you so much for joining us today. I mean, you are one of the first and foremost people that I and this whole audience knows that we want to hear from. In the age of coronavirus, you represent both sides of the coin. So the physician side of you, and then also to the CFP side of you. So I'm just fascinated by and curious what you can bring to us to help explain what the heck is going on, where we're in for, what we might be in for, and things like that. But I thought that a great place to start would be, I looked at your Twitter and your pin tweet, well, lots of pin tweets. And for this audience, I will say that they date back from May 15th, 2013, March 8th, 2013, May 12th, 2013. And I will let you talk about it, but it is extremely, it's both eerie and prescient at the same time. So why don't you explain those tweets?
Well, so those tweets, I have worried about coronavirus along with a number of other viruses for a long time. But back in 2013, there is a number of coronavirus cases that were fatal, that were very serious, that occurred in the Middle East and in France, and people died. And at that time, that particular strain of virus was not very infectious, so it was hard to pass. And my original training was in virology and immunology, and we know that viruses mutate all the time. And so I tweeted out, I'm worried about coronavirus. Could coronavirus be the next pandemic? Could it be the next black swan? And, just because it was so bad, I said, all it takes is one gene to go bad for it to be easily transmitted through aerosol, through air droplets. And that's what's happened now. And so now we're cooked. We have this horrible coronavirus pandemic, and I was just practical. It could have been any of 1,000 viruses, but that one just really scared me at the time. And I knew we were not prepared.
So, quick question here. Is coronavirus a new normal for us?
Well, coronavirus has been around a long time, and there are a number of other viruses that could cause significant issues down the road. And so, viruses have always been the new normal for us. Except, pandemics occur every 20 to 30 years on average. Most of them are more easily contained. For example, the flu virus, we have a good vaccine for, and it changes, it mutates. The flu mutates all the time. And because we're so adept at flu, we're usually good at targeting what strains are going to happen. And so we can at least mitigate how bad it is. The problem with coronavirus is none of us have immunity because we haven't been sick. So now you have an entire population of how many 8 billion people who've never experienced this, unlike the flu. So that's why this one's so bad. And so could it happen again? Yes. And this is the point that I have been trying to get across to people for over a decade now. My training in medicine and my training in finance, it all really revolves around complex adaptive system science, which is very nerdy. And people who know me know that I'm a little nerdy, but I don't usually go into the depths of talking about how nerdy I am. So now it's going to show.
I love it. By the way, I love this side, and I think that we really need to hear this side. Somebody like you that can interpret the complex science behind this and then bring it down. I think is very much needed right now in the market. I'm so grateful that you're here today, and I know that everybody listening is. So, yeah, explain these complex adaptive systems and nerd out on it, Carolyn.
So, what it is, and people have heard of this before. It's the unknown unknowns. And so much of science is around predicting complex adaptive systems. So, earthquakes, the weather, virus transmission, the economy. And both of my fields are all about trying to predict a future and plan for that future. And the argument, and so when I talk about complex adaptive system science study, most of the scientists that are involved in that really focus on how much better can we get at predicting the future. And the problem with complex adaptive systems is we don't know how tiny little things can cause big issues, or whether big issues might not even make a difference. So you can get better at trying, but then something can upend all your models. For example, like with weather and global warming and all that, it gets harder and harder to predict exactly what's going to happen and how bad it's going to get. And so my argument has been all along that we need to quit worrying about predicting so much, because we know, you do the best you can, but you don't hang your hat on that. And instead, we need to create resiliency to prepare for whatever is going to be thrown at us. And there have been a number of authors that have written about this through the years. A book that really turned me onto it over a decade ago was called The Age of the Unthinkable by Joshua Ramo. That really opened up my eyes because it talks about all the huge systems that we've built in the world, our electrical grids, the internet, the banking system, and how one tiny thing going wrong can bring it crashing down. And that's what's happened with the coronavirus. It's shown all the flaws in these systems, not only in our medical system, but also in our economic system. As of today, the paycheck protection loans are supposed to be applied for, and all of those systems are crashing because nobody is prepared for that influx. Same with unemployment system. And my argument over the past decade with public health is that we've been cutting public health funding for a decade now. And that started with the GOP back when they won the House after Obama got in office. The first thing they cut was the Public Health and Protection Fund. And that's huge. And so to me, I'm hoping, I have been screaming about our lack of public health funding, our lack of community health funding. And in finance, I've been talking about how we're doing financial planning wrong. So many financial advisors give these beautiful projections about, if you do this, you're going to be able to retire at age 60, even though you're 30. How in the heck can we predict 30 years in the future, right? And somebody who's retiring at age 60, they're going to count on the market taking care of them for 30 to 40 years. This is wrong to let people's hats hang on that. And instead, we need to focus more on planning for the present, making certain people are resilient so that whatever happens, they're prepared for it.
So how do you develop that resiliency, and how are you helping to develop that in clients? What are you saying right now in the age of coronavirus? But I'm also curious to understand, what were you saying in January of 2020? Perhaps actually you were talking about it more than any of us because you could see, and again, prescient planner Carolyn could see, what could potentially be a black swan where people like me, I don't know, I'll speak for myself. I didn't really think that this coronavirus was going to escalate the way that it has right now. And we have over 1 million cases in the country. We have a global death toll of over 52,000. That was as of yesterday. So I'm sure that we're probably at about 55. So how do you build that resilience, and how do you have that discussion with people when we're in the thick of it and we haven't even seen the bottom?
So first off, we've had these discussions in our firm for, 15 years. And so the key is this is not a discussion that you have when things are falling apart. This is discussion you have all the time. What are you doing to create resiliency in your clients? And so, and you can go back to my writing, you can go back to, I do probably 4 or 5 interviews a week. And one of the things I harp on that nobody wants to listen to is that you have to do certain things. You have to have your emergency fund, and too many people don't do that. You have to be properly insured. You have to make certain you're not more aggressively invested than you can financially or psychologically take. And this is where a lot of planners, to me, are, and I don't want to say they're struggling with this because it's like, oh, the market comes back and you have to take more risk to make sure you don't run out of money. And that's not necessarily true, because you can look at, like, from the 1930s and the 1950s, the market didn't come back for 20 years. And so, but we have recency bias that most of us have been alive since 87 on up and involved in our professions. I mean, I didn't get involved in this profession until, the early 2000s, and the market's always has come back. But you can't count on that, and you can't have faith in that. You've got to build the resiliency. And so we have never let clients take more risk than they can afford to take. So, we're much more heavily in bond portfolios. People talk about 60-40 stock bond. We're like 60-40 bond stock. And
right.
Our clients in retirement are generally 60 to 80% bonds. The other thing, though, that's even more important is we try to get clients to actually work as long as possible. And most of our clients end up not retiring totally until their late 60s, early 70s. And we had somebody, they made him quit when he was 84.
Wow, that's great.
And the key is, and so the first thing we do with clients, no matter what their age, is, are you happy now? It's so important, because you have people coming in, if they're miserable in their job and they're 40 years old, you got to fix that, because all you know that you have is today. You don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. That's a complex adaptive system. Coronavirus may hit you, but it's more likely to be a truck. You just never know. And if you're not living fully now, you're doing it wrong. And so creating resiliency means getting people into jobs they love, where they'll want to work longer. And hopefully those jobs will be around, but having emergency funds, keeping their life simple, because it's much cheaper to have a simplicity in your life than it is to have a gazillion different things. So getting people out of that consumerism mentality and pulling back on the things that aren't of value in how they're spending money. So a ton, a lot of different things. And we talk about health too, because if somebody is living unhealthy, an unhealthy lifestyle, we'll bring it up. And it's like, you have this unhealthy lifestyle, you may have all these different health issues. Your life expectancy is not as good. So, you either need to plan on dying young or spend it, and you can spend more because of that, as long as you have good advance directive. And at being brutally honest but kind about, and just from a sense of empathy, of nobody's perfect, and so planning for who people are instead of who you want them to be or who they want to be. You got to really address who they are, and that's how you create the resiliency.
I mean, I really love that. And I think that your clients love it too, because one of the things I did notice is that Life Planning Partners is not taking on any new clients right now. So I think that that is just testament to your passion. You talk about not being in the industry, being a physician before you were a CFP. So what was the genesis of you creating your firm 15 years ago?
Well, it all came from my husband and I trying to find a financial planner. So all four of our parents died when we were fairly young. We were in our 20s and early 30s. He inherited some money from his parents in the mid 90s, and we invested that, and we thought we were smart, and because we did well. And he was an engineer, and he hated being an engineer, and he didn't want to go back to being an engineer. And I said, I'm not going to take care of you, so we need to figure out whether this money is enough. And so we try to find a financial planner, and all of them were about investments or sales. They didn't do real financial planning. This was like in 2000. And so I went back to school for fun to learn about financial planning and fell in love with it. And so my firm, I opened it from the beginning to be a comprehensive planning firm, of which investment management is only a part. And I think that's another mistake in this profession, is that the advisors make it all about investment management. Not all of them. Thankfully, over my past, I guess I could say 20 years since I started in this profession, that more and more people are doing real financial planning. More and more people are becoming fiduciaries and really trying to help their clients. But they're still, I did an interview just recently. I said it went from, and actually I wrote an article, it went from just a small handful of us doing this to now more of a bucket full, and there's still a big ocean out there of it's people just focusing on the investments, and that's not the important part. It's understanding how money fits in your client's life. What are their goals for their money? And if you do a good job, so this gets back to your risk tolerance question. The most important determinant of risk tolerance is understanding what your client's needs and wants are, and never investing more aggressively than they can afford to lose to meet their needs. So you need to make sure you have the needs bucket very conservatively invested, so if the world does fall apart, that they know that they're going to be okay.
And so what system are you using to calibrate that risk, and how often are you doing it? Does it look different for you from an integration perspective? You're integrating both the health and wellness factor into the lexicon of financial planning.
Right.
Does your risk calibration and sensitivity analysis look different in your firm versus another firm?
Oh my God, yeah. So this is what's going to kill all the software people.
Oh,
We don't use software for this. Yeah. And so we have our own questionnaire, which I know, technically, I know that there are a lot of good things out there, but our number one determinant of risk is a lot of conversations and ongoing conversations. The other mistake that financial planners make is they do a financial plan to bring clients in the door, and they rarely revisit it unless the client asks. So every year we redo the client's cash flows and projections and how they're spending money, and making certain that what they're doing aligns with their values and needs, and making certain that the portfolio fits that. So along with their risk tolerance questionnaire, and we ask all the, I think it's on our website. I'm not sure if it is, but I'm happy to share it with the audience. The questionnaire that we use, that my investment manager came up with, because they were important questions to get the overall flavor of how that client is. And
That
we
would
do,
be great, by the way. That would be beneficial. We'll make sure that that's posted
yeah,
to
happy
this
to do that.
episode. It's a bonus coronavirus special
Yeah.
here, so it'll be coming out as episode 2.
Okay, I'm happy to do that. And the
Okay.
thing with that is we don't make clients retest that every year, but we do have conversations about their goals every year and make certain that their portfolio still fits what their goals are for their life. And so if a client says to us, okay, I really do think that I want to quit in 5 years, that's where we get even more granular about making certain that we understand their spending, and we're breaking down the spending into needs and wants, and that we start positioning that portfolio to be very conservative then, because people, that's my other complaint. I think people are just too aggressively invested too close to retirement, and that sequence of returns risk that people are experiencing now. If you retire right now when the market's crashed and
Yeah.
you're aggressively invested, you're messed over. And so as soon as somebody starts getting to that point where they're going to need that they're going to need their money anytime soon, we start dialing it back.
So then it seems to me I'm making the assumption that the response to coronavirus in your firm is different. I can't use you as a benchmark. I could use you as an ideal. Exactly. What is your advice? I mean, there are plenty of financial planning firms, plenty of great advisors that are trying to do the best job they can. And then I think that this questionnaire that you are giving us is a great start at how I can start to bridge and make a pivot into that new conversation. But what is your advice for firms that have not been managing so, I guess, conservative? What would you say right now to the firm where the phone's ringing off the hook? It's April 3rd. We've got 2 pandemics. And we've got an election year on top of that. You
Mhm.
know, how do you handle that right now?
Well, number one is you've got to have really good communication with your clients. And so, the nice thing for us is when all this started happening, our clients that are retired or very close to retired, we reassured them with that, look, we've planned your cash flows out for the next 5 years, and which we have. They have the cash they need. So, and that the stock part is this part way down the road, and we've just hammered that in all along, and so they're all going great, and it's real fun that they're opening. And the other thing we do not do, which the software people are going to hate me for this one too, but we don't do performance reporting. Because it creates unnecessary drama both to the upside and the downside. So when the market's doing really well and they say, oh, look at all this money you made me this year, Tim will say, that's our investment manager, I didn't make you that money, the market made that money. And so when the market crashes, don't blame me because I didn't do that either. And our clients get it. And so we don't do performance reporting, although they do look at their statements. Our custodian is Fidelity, and not all the clients look at the statements. So what we've done with our clients who are in retirement or are getting close to it is we're redoing their year, because every year we do their projections. We're redoing their projections and showing them you're still fine, right? And in fact, you're the people who need to keep spending because this economy is bad and you have the resources to spend. Keep living your life. Our younger clients, we've done a great job educating them, and it was so rewarding to us when we've reached out to clients individually because they're scared, not necessarily about the market, but more about just the world in general, right? And so reaching out to them, we've done individual calls to some clients, especially our people more at risk, just older people who, are more isolated. But we've done, we're in constant communication with our clients. And we've done a couple of webinars, which were very well attended. We don't usually we do a quarterly newsletter, but it's never just generic material. It always has important things in it. So our newsletter open rate is normally 60, 65%, which
Wow, that's really good. I think the benchmark is like 18 or 19%. Are your clients calling you for medical advice too? Some ways, because we hear a lot of competing messages. Wear a mask, don't wear a mask, avoid getting testing unless you have symptoms. I'm just curious, you being a medical doctor and a CFP, are they calling and saying, hey, I don't know the answer to that question. I'm going to give her a money question. I'm going to give her a health question. I'm going to give her a wellness question. I mean, I want to call you before my GP.
Well, and so the deal with that is our clients do ask stuff like that sometimes. I always tell them you get what you pay for, and you're not paying me to be a doctor. But I do tell them the prevailing advice, and the problem. And this is where I'm very angry right now. And you might not see it, but I've been talking about lack of preparedness for epidemics for a long time. I've written, and in fact, I tweeted out not long ago 4 articles I've written in Forbes over the past 10 years about this. Yeah, it's like nobody listens.
I told you so. I told you so.
Right.
I mean, yeah,
I'm always saying that because I'm just like, because I talk to politicians. A lot of people know I do work with just volunteering, mostly consulting with politicians on health policy, and nobody listens. It's like, it's not a problem until it's a problem. And so the problem with coronavirus is we knew back in 2013 just how bad it could be. And had public health funding been good, we would have studied the hell out of that virus. So we would have known, we would have had preliminary immunizations in place. We would have known modes of transmission. We would have had tests already created and ready to replicate. It's like, so our immune system, when you get exposed to something, you create antibodies, right? So that you don't get it again. And even after you don't get exposed to that for a long time, your antibodies go back down. But you always have 1 or 2 cells in your body that recognizes those antigens again, the viruses. And so as soon as it recognizes it, it's ready to mass produce the antibodies very quickly. So instead of it taking a couple weeks for your immune system to develop, it happens in a matter of days, right? That's how immunizations work. Well, the same thing, had we studied this virus and we already knew what antigens were available, we could have had the formula ready to start the testing process and the vaccination process then and there, but we didn't have public health funding. So the problem is a lot of what you're hearing, they just don't know the answer. So the mask versus no mask. The problem with masks is most of them are worthless because they're open and you can still get the aerosols. It's the N95 masks, the ones that are tight fitting, that actually work some, but still, even with the mask, it's like if you touch things, and one of the things that just kills me is seeing people, they wear gloves everywhere and then they rub their face with their glove. And I'm like, that's stupid. So number one is everybody needs to practice frequent hand washing with plain soap and water. You don't need all these disinfectants. Soap disrupts the virus. That's simple as can be. Wash your hands frequently, just take showers, every day. And as far as the mask, they're showing maybe that masks are out. And so the latest, greatest is that masks actually keep people who have the virus from passing it out as much to others.
Okay. That's an interesting distinction. What if you don't have a mask? Because, well, first of all, N95 masks are hard to come by, and they want to reserve those masks for essential workers. Absolutely. But what if you don't have a mask? I mean, I see people looking like they're going to Michael's Fabrics and just using ordinary fabric and attaching it with elastic. I mean, is that enough of a barrier to the corona? Well, probably not, obviously, but is it at least a something that we can do? What if you don't own an N95 mask, or what if you don't own a mask at all? Should you even go out of your house and go to the grocery store and go to the pharmacy if you need?
So here's and again, it's complex adaptive system. You don't know how lucky you're going to be or unlucky, right? And so the more you can do to reduce your exposure, the better off you are. right? So going out as little as possible right now is very smart. And when you go out, so for example, when I go out, I take so that is where you would use something like alcohol or a hand sanitizer. I actually do have my rubbing alcohol, and I wipe down the thing. But the chance that the virus is on every piece of food you pick up is so low, right? It's more when you're around people. So it's that 6-foot barrier that's the most important thing, is that distancing. So that person that used the cart, that's highly likely. That's why I wipe it down. But picking up groceries, most likely the person putting the groceries on there did it a long time ago, because the virus doesn't last. It does last, but on a cold, hard surface, the chance that it's going to keep alive is really low. So you can put your groceries in your basket and all that, then bring your groceries home. Some people are wiping them down. I think that's a little overboard, but there is a chance that you could still get it. So the things where people have been real close, for like the cart, that person's been breathing on that cart, pushing it around. That's something you want to just wipe down the front of, right? Otherwise, I don't get too neurotic about it. But if you do live in a highly congested area, so like you're in a city and there's no way to maintain that 6-foot distance, I think masks are a good way to go. Better than nothing. Now, the thing is, though, don't be using gloves and masks and then just taking them off. You gotta there's a way that we derobe when we're in medicine, when you're in surgery. You gotta pull things off appropriately. So you wash your hands, and you take your gloves off, and you wash your hands, and you take your mask off, and you get rid of that, and you immediately put it in the laundry. Because remember, soap kills the virus. So those are things you can do, but we don't know what's going to work. Just the most important thing is the social distancing.
So what about if you don't own a mask? Is a scarf an adequate, at least a baseline substitute, understanding that, yes, you still have to practice that 6-foot barrier and stay away from people, and have a little bit of a buffer between you and that person, and washing your hands with soap and water an appropriate time. So you would recommend, and I'm asking for a friend here who doesn't have a mask.
It's better than nothing.
Here's the effect of the virus that I didn't see. And like you and your husband, I lost my father early before. Yeah. And you and I have had discussions about that. And now I have my mother, who is in her late 70s, that lives in an adult care. It bridges between a care facility, but there's people there who are her age who don't need the care. What do you do? Because now we can't get, especially women like me over 40, and this is the podcast for women over 40, and this is where we are right now. Yes, our kids are healthy and for the most part okay. They're living on their own. They have jobs. It's the aging right now that we're dealing with. Aging parents who we can't see, we can't touch, we can't go there. Again, I can't go to my mother because right now there are about 100 people like her where she lives.
Right.
And it's introducing a new level of risk. And you've always been a proponent on talking about the 4 different aging challenges. What's your advice for women like me, other than probably to stay away? How do we manage our loved ones through this virus right now?
Really tough. This goes back to, one of the things I've talked about with aging is I don't think we should keep all seniors living together. I think we need to have mixed age communities where we take care of our seniors, and then that reduces the risk of things like this spreading between seniors. So that's another part of my book. But because there's so many things we do that we don't think about the unintended consequences of. And so right now, what do? send them a lot of love and FaceTime them. Hopefully,
Yeah.
go and look out the window. I mean, if it's possible, you bring them in your home, because that's another way to deal with it.
Yeah, and I've offered that. I've been doing weekly live Facebook lives, actually taking my mother on a walk and taking a lot of other people with me. Apparently, it's something that other people are enjoying too, which is great. And I even heard from one of the seniors. She said, Tina, you don't realize how great this is for people like me living alone. I have offered. My mother is fiercely independent, loves her volunteer work and her independent life. And part of me, Carolyn, wants to go and just bring her and just do an intervention and have her tested, know that she's okay, and then just bring her to my house. But, this is, again, the situation that we're dealing with. Economically, she's okay. However, right now, you deal with a force of will and with parents who are fiercely independent and who fight you sometimes on these topics. Have you had meetings with your clients and families to sway people or sway the opinions of elders who think that they're right?
Well, sometimes the elders are right. I'm going to break your heart here. So here's the deal. People who are in their 70s, 80s, that they've lived a long time, right? And they've seen a lot, and they've become set in their ways. And this is where I get people to understand that this is why you have to live every day fully, because you do not know when bad things are going to happen. And the older you get, the more likely those bad things are to happen. And so if you have somebody who's fiercely independent and they're at peace with their life, and they most likely have that attitude of, I don't want to go do that. And if I get this and die, well, I'm in my 80s. And that's okay. And I think we've forgotten that in society, that we're all going to die of something at some point. And so, yes, you love them very much. And that's why you got to live in the moment as much as possible with them. And you have to be ready to let go at any time, because sometime it's going to happen sometime, right? So if you can talk sense into them, great. If not, you have to come from a place of I and say, Mom, I love you so very much, and I'm worried about you being in here. And I really want you to be with us, because I feel it would be safe for you being with us. And so please come live with us. And when you put it in that place of I, instead of, Mom, you're being stupid being here because you're going around all these people and you're going to die. When you make it come from your heart of why and how much you love your mother, one, she'll appreciate it more, but two, she might actually do it. And three, if she doesn't, you've tried, and that's all you can do.
Yeah, I mean, I think that one of the common things, that the feelings that I've always received from you, is that the empathy, and whether or not that you're guiding a conversation around money or in health, that empathy is something that resonates with me. And I think that it's a way to, for all of us to be on the same page. You're right. If I had a discussion with my mother, which I have, I have had, it did come from a place of the heart, and she appreciated it. She really, really did. And I've been part of her financial planning as well too. So she's been really open with us, and she's been intentional about making sure that she has everything in place. My aunt's an estate attorney, so she drank the Kool-Aid long ago, and so that's I like that approach. I like that approach a lot. So here we are. Again, there's been no bottom, there's been no peak, there's been no trough yet to the coronavirus. But how do we all start to get to a place where, when eventually this crisis is going to stop? Eventually there'll be, whether or not it's a vaccine or whether or not that there's antibodies that either we could test and see whether or not that we have the antibodies for. How do we manage ourselves right now with regards to both our health, and our money? Unemployment right now is a big issue. 10 million people just lost their jobs. A lot of people are worried right now. that website with the protection, the planned,
the paycheck protection.
Exactly, right? I'm already seeing things on social media that people have tried to do it. They got locked out of the system after being there for an hour or so and waiting and then filling out part of the forms. I mean, what are we supposed to do now? And what are we supposed to do after this? How do we start to come out of this and live our life different?
So first off, the big thing right now that we have to do, this is where a sense of community is so important. And this goes back again to complex adaptive systems. The best way to create resiliency is to have a good community, right? And so part of the problem in our society is we've relied so much on big systems. So, for example, and that's why this banking system, it's why it's all failing, because we're all going to this big central repository to try to get help, and that's not working. So, for right now, we all have to reach out to each other. We have to help each other. I mean, if you know people in need that have lost their jobs and they can't float it, for me, instead of I'm trying to support charities right now, and one of the things that we've done in our practice is we have clients that either volunteer work for charities, and then we have small business clients who have kept their employees and they're going to pay their employees. Well, they're offering those employees to go volunteer for the charities that are losing their volunteers because most of their volunteers are older.
Right.
And so we're connecting within the community to get people to help each other. And so that's what we have to do. Check on your neighbors, check on people you know. I offered, I'm a prepper, and not in the classic sense of I worry about anarchy, but in a complex adaptive system sense of that I live in Florida and we have hurricanes, but plus you just never know what's going to happen. So I always have 3 months supply of everything. We have food. I didn't have to run out for TP, and I didn't have to hoard it because we already had it, right? And so, I tell people that it's like, oh, people are going to break in my house, but I mean, I don't worry about that. But I actually, have offered people up TP. It's like you need to call me. All right. And so by doing that, by everybody helping each other right now, we're going to get through this, because eventually it was kind of like when the Affordable Care Act, when the website for the Affordable Care Act crashed.
Yeah, that crashed too. Mm-hmm.
Yep. It's like I just said to people, be patient, poop happens, that give them time and they'll get it fixed. And they did get it fixed. And so what's going to happen with this is that people are suffering and they got to get it fixed, and hopefully they do. And meanwhile, we need to help our neighbors through this. Now, so that's now. And what do we do, though, in the future? This is where I am going to scream, because I finally think now my platform, I'll be heard. And so we need to create better systems and processes and have them in place for when these things happen. And so you bring it more to preparing communities, not just from the financial side, but from the public health side, from the community health side. What can be in place that helps protect people? Food supply. That's another huge issue, that we're too nationalized in our food supply. And so bringing back food production to communities, creating energy independent homes. People don't realize how fragile our electrical grid is. And so by creating and we have the technology now to make all of our homes and businesses energy independent. But it's, corporations, the big bucks, that don't let us do that because they make all this money. So that's the sort of thing I'm going to scream about, is what can we do to create inner resiliency as individuals and as communities, as states, and then as a nation, because there's so much we can do we're not doing right now, and hopefully this is the wake-up call.
I mean, does prescient planner Carolyn see that healthcare policy and healthcare reform actually starts to take on a different level of importance as a result of coronavirus, because there's going to be pressure from both sides?
Well, this is where I'm, I've worked with politicians for a long time, and they frustrate the hell out of me. And I actually gave up. So I was very involved with healthcare reform for many years, and I actually gave up about three years ago when Trump was elected.
Mhm.
And I hoped briefly that maybe he would have some redeeming quality and actually make something go through. But I learned within about a year that no, they're not going to fix the healthcare system. So that's when I quit and focused on other things, which all the other work I was doing. And
Yeah.
so I quit all that other work I was doing. I quit that at the end of the year, so I have my life back. And I'm excited about that. And
Yeah, we have.
so, especially with all this happening, I am going to be a very strong voice for pushing healthcare reform. Now, will our politicians do it? It's like the political system disappoints me on both sides. Both parties disappoint me. I rail on the Republicans a lot right now, but that they deserve it because they're the ones who cut public health funding. And I can show you. I've got all the stories, right?
Oh, I know that you've got the archives, and you have.
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And you've been really vocal. And I think that there's probably the time for what you can teach us all is exactly the time that I think you'll find a lot of people listening, because the severity, the wounds that are going to last
Right.
forever and ever, just our brains, probably literally our brains have changed. I've heard that story of certain traumas and certain things happening. It literally changes your brain, right, Dr. McClanahan?
It does. It
Yeah.
does. And so hopefully, so my focus this next year is really to get the word out about what we can do next time. Because, I laugh about this because every market downturn through the past, 15 years, I'm in the press a lot and I get calls from the press. What do you tell your clients to do? And they always call when the market's crashing, right? What do you tell your clients to do to position themselves? I'm like, they should have positioned themselves a long time ago. Why do you always call me during market crashes? And nobody listens. No, I mean, it's still every crash, it's the same. And I blame the press for that. It's like they create drama where drama shouldn't be a lot of times. And so to try to get people to plan more so we have less drama is my mission.
And I love what you said. It's all about creating that resiliency,
Right.
but before you're even in that crisis, do the things that you can to minimize your risk exposure so that when these things happen, because indeed they will. This is probably, I don't want to ask you what's behind the coronavirus. It'll be something else, but to make sure that as a community right now, control the things that we can control and make sure that we're being great citizens, that we're being kind to other people. We're building our communities. We're reaching out to our communities in ways that we can help, even if it's just the simplest thing, calling somebody up, making sure that they're okay, doing a Facebook Live. I recently wrote a LinkedIn recommendation. I've actually hired people during this crisis and paid them money. And so that to me has been very satisfying. And I'm looking at some of the things that I can offload right now in hopes of just injecting a little bit of more positivity into the universe. And this is a podcast that has positivity and inspiration behind it. So I wanted to end on a positive note. So one of the things I do have to ask you is that you not only tweet about coronaviruses and about healthcare policy reform, which is great, but you have a very interesting hobby. And I never had the chance, Carolyn, to ask you about that origin story behind that hobby.
So my butterflies, and it's so funny because those butterflies are my mental health therapy, actually. And I just go out there and it's basically my butter as a farm almost in my backyard. And so I raise monarchs. And the reason I got into it is because monarchs can only eat one plant. It's called milkweed. And we used to have millions and millions and millions of monarchs, but because of pesticide use and farmers killing off all their milkweed, their monarchs are now endangered. But if everybody planted milkweed in their yard, then the monarchs would come back and quit using pesticides too. And the monarchs would come back. And so I planted milkweed in my yard and just became so fascinated with them. And then the wasp got my monarchs, right? And so I'm like, oh, I got to prevent that. So I started making these little cages to put over the plants to protect them once the monarchs laid the eggs. And so over the years, it's just escalated. And now I have basically a production of where I grow my milkweed. It looks like a big pot farm. But
Yeah, I don't even know what milkweed looks like.
I know it looks. People, I put a picture on it. It sort of looks like pot, and so I used to have this big garden of potted milkweed, and where they lay the eggs. And then I have what I call the nurseries. And my husband's so wonderful because he built all this stuff for me. And so it's basically these cages that are like 4x4x4 that I put the plants in when they first hatch, when the caterpillars first hatch, and I let them grow from little itsy bitsy babies to junior caterpillars. And then once they become junior caterpillars, they start eating very voraciously. So then I have a different type of milkweed called giant milkweed. And we have the hatching palace of where I put the giant milkweed in, and I put the junior caterpillars in there so they finish eating. And then that's where they cocoon in the palace. And then once they hatch, then I release them and it's all over. So last year I raised 671. I keep a journal.
Oh my God. How do you keep track?
So I'll tell you, I do, you talk about journaling. Don't laugh. Now people see you.
I'm not.
So Tina can see everything I do. So here's my butterfly journal. So every day I write down like my little, how many butterflies did I get? What problems I have? Here's my exercise journal. Here's my goal journal.
Wow.
Here's my time journal and my wisdom journel.
Oh my God.
Yeah. And so that's how I keep up with it.
That's beautiful.
Yeah. So it's going to be really big because I already have, it's about 140 something chrysalises that are going to hatch. And I still have about 60 caterpillars going, except I'm running out of food. So I got to find, I'm out of milkweed. So search it around and trying to get more milkweed so those guys will live. But, you do the best you can.
Wow. That's incredible. So you're counting the chrysalises, right, before they actually hatch, because I would imagine like butterflies, it would be impossible to count butterflies when they almost all look the same, right?
Well, actually, no, I count them when they fly away. And so remember, they hatch in the palace. It takes their wings 4 to 6 hours to dry. And so I actually sometimes I'll do family photos. I'll line them all up when their wings are still drying. And that's how I count them. And then I take a family photo. And then as their wings dry, I line them up on the outside of the palace so that when their wings finally dry, they fly away.
That's really, really fascinating.
Yeah, I love it.
That's really incredible. That's so inspirational. I love those journals. I have my gratitude here. You can see my 5-minute journal, which is my gratitude journal, right?
That's good.
And so I'm writing in that. But now you're expanding my mind and taking journaling to a whole new level. I love that.
Well, I've been doing it a long time. So
yeah, I was about to say, how long have you had that? How long have you had that habit? I've had 5-minute journal habit before it was 5-minute journal, it was just a regular journal that I would just write and write the things that I'm grateful for and the things that I want to happen, and reflecting on my life at certain meaningful parts. But gratitude has been a part of my life for a long, long time, over a decade now.
Wow, yeah, that's fantastic. Yeah, I mean, to me, the gratitudes every morning are so important. My husband and I say to each other. I've been journaling like 20 years, but I broke it up into doing like these type of journals every time. Yeah. I mean, probably around 2015, I want to say. Is when I started doing all the different journals. And the wisdom book is actually when I read a really good book that has something of wisdom in it, I write that down so that I don't have to read the book again. Because, you read things and you forget. And so whenever I learn something new, I write it in the wisdom book.
So it's a perfect segue to my last question, which is how I end every podcast. And we all have some sort of physical object that gives us that superhero strength that conviction in ourselves. And it's really fascinating. I've always had something that dates back from when I was 6 years old. So, especially in times of uncertainty, I use it and I carry it with me. And the more I speak to other people, particularly other successful women over 40, they have similar icons. So, what is your.
You're going to die when you hear what I do to give me.
Okay, so there we go. You didn't even know that question was coming.
I have power underwear.
Yes! I love it.
And all it is I always have real colorful underwear. So I have tons of underwear, but I have real colorful, always comfortable. I don't wear uncomfortable underwear, but really colorful underwear. And I don't care if I'm even wearing white pants. I'm like, I need to wear power underwear today.
Yeah. I love it. That's so Carolyn. It's just part of you. I love your sense of humor. I love your authenticity. I think that that's what's so great about you is that you can get very technical and you can get very fun and very silly and totally relate. But it really is the truth. And I imagine that it gives you superhero strength in the same way that we all need that, whatever it is for ourselves.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's true. It's like going back to just making certain that you're taking care of yourself first and that you're loving yourself. Because if you're not taking care of yourself and loving yourself, it makes it harder to take care of others and love others. Mm. And so just, living in love and joy every day, that's the goal, because you never know when it's going to end. And if we all started doing that, the world would be a much better place.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Carolyn. How do people get in touch with you about that upcoming book that you're going to have, about the upcoming podcast that you're going to launch? All of these?
And so I do have my personal website so I write for a number of publications, Financial Planning Magazine, Forbes. I've not been writing for as much, but I'm doing some there still. And so I post everything that I'm doing on my personal website, CarolynMcClanahan.com. And so people can find it there. And my goal, and I have so much going on, and right now I'm focusing on everything with the election coming up and health policy. I do want to start a podcast, but this coronavirus thing I've been thinking about this book a long time, and now it's pushed me over the edge. So that's going to be my focus this year. And I'll get out more articles on that. Podcast, maybe you can help me with that, because I've been wanting to do it and people have been begging me, but I just haven't made that a priority, because that's yet another, avenue.
Yeah, it's another thing. What about speaking? So I know, and I've checked out your website, CarolynMcClanahan.com. You have a lot of great resources on there, as well as the ability to book you for a speaker. I've seen you speak at lots and lots of events. You're a great presenter. You're fun. You're technical. Or you introduce that novelty component. You get me engaged when you're on stage. Are there with a lot of these conferences in flux right now, are there hopes to get back on the speaking circuit?
Well, right now everything's been canceled. I mean, I was scheduled for the most of April and May, and that's all gone. Which actually, I was it's a nice break, actually, because I do 20 to 30 events a year, and that was getting to be a bit much, especially me trying to want to do more with writing. So this year, just like taking a break, but I am doing webinars for people. I know that the American College is going to have me do a webinar based on everything going on that they're going to make free for advisors. So you can look them up for that. I don't remember. It's in a couple weeks. I want to say the 15th or something like that, April 15th. And so I am doing webinars, and I'm doing some stuff for NAP, for some webinars, just so, because I know people have so much on their mind that they need help with. And so that's what I'm going to speak mostly about, health policy, health insurance, things like that, because it's on people's minds right now. But that, and then, I'm going to try to work on writing more, take this downtime to do that. And of course, take care of my practice. I got a great crew, but I still got to, I'm very
Of course, you're extremely loyal to them, and I will be happy to share my podcast resources and everything with what I've learned, because I think that yours is the voice that we need to hear and that we're ready to listen to. I think that you've been writing about these concepts for years and years, and I'm going to say they took on, because of coronavirus, your work takes on a new meaning and a new appreciation for me. And I'm grateful for the work that you've done, the work that you continue to do, the support that you gave, the time, the fact that we did this for everyone listening here. I mean, I gave you just a couple days notice. So I'm trying to just get this out as soon as possible for everyone to hear it, because you've given us a lot of things to think about. And you're a person that, you're a great mind. You're a deep thinker, and, let's lean into each other and build community from it and have better lives and be more resilient. So thank you so much, Carolyn.
Oh, thank you for having me. You're always a joy.
Thank you. Be well.
You too.
You're listening to In the Suite, a podcast that shares amazing stories of women in business in the financial services and the wealth management industry. This podcast is proudly sponsored by C-Suite Social Media, a digital marketing and social media consultancy for C-Suite leaders in finance and technology. You can visit us at csuitesocialmedia.com to learn more and for show notes from today's broadcast. Also, if you would like to share the name of a successful woman in business we should interview on a future podcast, please send it to me at tina@csuitesocialmedia.com. And thank you so much for listening. I hope you found this special bonus episode with Carolyn McClanahan as amazing as we did. Stay safe, and thank you so much for listening.